Welcome. This is the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping others through real estate investing. Our hosts interview guests from all aspects of real estate investing who generously share valuable experiences and advice. Whether you're starting out or an experienced investor, this is the show for you.
Hello and how's it going? My name is Travis Shelton and welcome to the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we focus on the mindset, motivation, and methodologies of successful real estate investors. And today is going to be your second chance to be able to check out a recent Hot Real Estate Investing meetup where we had a special guest, Tracy Royce, come and talk to us about financial independence through real estate investing through flipping, or FIRE as a lot of people call it. So if you're interested in financial independence, if you're interested in flipping, or you're just interested in being able to find out a little bit of how you can make real estate work for you, or how you can find financial independence through real estate, you're not going to want to miss this meetup and all the educational content that Tracy's able to deliver. Hope you enjoy. Okay. So lastly, I want to introduce the Royce of real estate, Tracy Royce. She's somebody who I've been trying to get to speak at my meetup for, how long?
Over 3 years.
Over 3 years.
I blame it on COVID, it wasn't me.
But we're blaming it on COVID because literally, I think she was coming the Tuesday before the COVID outbreak, the February before the COVID outbreak. And then we rescheduled her, and the second outbreak of COVID came, and then I stopped the meetup and having people come together because I was like, this is crazy. So it's really a great pleasure of mine to introduce Tracy Royce, the Royce of Real Estate, to speak today at the Hot Real Estate Investing Meetup.
So normally this is an hour-and-a-half presentation. I'm going to condense it down to like 45 minutes. I'm going to fly through some of this. I will talk a little bit more about my journey as we get going. But in a nutshell, I've been on my own since 2015. What I mean by that is I used to work behind the scenes for other real estate investors like you guys, and the people that I worked with had dozens of rental properties. I did a ton of property management for them, also helped them build their businesses while the market was crashing, and finally decided if I can help make these guys millionaires, what if I just did some of this stuff on my own? So I finally branched off. There was a transition period there for 2015 and on. I've been sharing that on social media. I've been on a lot of different podcasts sharing that journey as well. I do regular speaking, and I also teach it as RIA. For those of you that are into financial independence and financial literacy, the third Tuesday of every month, I talk about this stuff in a nutshell as well. So let's talk about how rehabs can help get you to financial independence faster. So I will talk about FIRE values. Who here has heard of FIRE? Cool, so the majority of you. So for tonight, instead of financial independence, retire early, we'll kind of combine that with the idea of how do we supercharge that with real estate investing. So when I say FIRE, I'm talking about financial independence through real estate investing. Now, a lot of you, and I was in the same boat, are intimidated to get into flipping, right? There's a lot that goes into it. It can be really confusing if you don't know every step of the process. So I want to show you a little bit more simple approach and how to combine that with your financial independence numbers. And then lastly, how to be brave and boring to get ahead. I know it sounds like an odd combo. It'll make more sense as we go through these flyers or go through these slides. So most of you already know what FIRE is, financial independence, retire early, or financial independence through real estate investing. Now, what does this traditionally mean? So in the FIRE community, it usually has the tenets of super high savings rate. Does anyone want to guess what the average American savings rate is right now? So I heard -2, about 2%. So it's hovering at the lowest it has in quite some time, around 2 to 3% as of like pretty much right now. So for FIRE people, you want to aim for at least 20. For those of you who really want to supercharge, like 40, 50%. That's not always attainable unless you have dual income, but still high savings rate. Budgeting, I know a lot of us don't really like the B word. It's like cringy, right? But it is part of the process. We have to understand it. Aggressively investing. Now, I tend to like real estate investing. Some of you might like index funds, dividends, whatever pays you what you need to get to achieve FIRE, I'm fine with, but tonight I'll be focusing on real estate investing. And then discipline and vision. Man, is it so hard to stay, like, look where we're at in Old Town Scottsdale. There's all the bars and the shops and cars and nice things. So maybe this venue isn't the best to say this in, or maybe it is the best. But staying disciplined on what is more important to me, how do I get to my FIRE number faster, and ignoring a lot of this stuff, right? So maybe this is the perfect setting. So if there's someone here tonight, I'd like to take one of you through what I like to call the 7 whys exercise. What this looks like is, you know how like little kids, when you're like trying to explain something to them, and then they're like, well, why? And then you say, well, because it's this way. Well, why? So they keep digging into the whys of something. Most of us that get into real estate investing want financial freedom to some end, right? Like if I were to poll you guys, most of you would say, I want to go hang out at the beach and I want financial freedom. But when you really dive into what that means to you, you tend to dig into the values. And let me exemplify that. So do I have a brave volunteer? I don't want to pick a victim.
I'll do it.
All right, my man. Okay, so what's your name?
Jovan.
Jovan. All right, let's give him a round of applause for being brave. If you'd like to, sure. So Jovan, let me ask you, why would you like to create financial freedom? Can you guys help me keep count too, because I always forget. So.
I got you. Ultimately, probably to provide for my family. I think that's the biggest thing.
Okay, why is it important to provide for your family?
Ultimately, I feel like that's just the duty of myself and my family and how I was raised. I came from a very, very poor background, and I'm sure a lot of us can say that here, and that's why we're all here, to generate wealth and to do the things that get us to financial independence.
So I'll kind of count that as number 3. So it's really important for you to provide for your family. You came from a poor background, so why is it important for you to have your family have something different than what you had?
Ultimately, I think it's 2 things. One of it is the sacrifices that I've had to make were very challenging in my life, and same thing for my father, my grandfather, things like that. We all make sacrifices, especially to be successful in life. But on top of that, for my family not to have to make those sacrifices and experience those pains that I had to experience, trying to climb the way out of the trenches.
So we'll count that as like 4.5, 5.
Okay, I'm sorry.
So we'll no. You're doing fantastic actually. So my family doesn't have to go through the same generational trauma and sacrifice that I did. So number 6, why is that important to you?
Ultimately, I think it just breeds a better legacy. And I think that's really what everybody wants to leave behind, is a beautiful legacy. That's kind of why we do what we do, why we wake up early, why we make as many calls as we do, facilitate as many connections. It's really that, actually, for me personally.
And then why do you want to leave a legacy?
I just feel like it's my mark on earth.
Ooh,
to create not only something for myself, but something for not just my grandkids, my great-grandkids, my great-great-grandkids. I want something that will be everlasting, I would like my last name to be as familiar and popular as the Rothschilds.
Dang. Let's give him a huge round of applause. Good job. Very good job. So he started a little bit deeper than most people do, which is like, hey, I just want to live a good life. He went from, we've had generational trauma and sacrifice, to now I'm thinking 4 generations ahead to be extremely wealthy. So he has this really global view. So some of your values would be abundance, right? So not just getting out of generational trauma, but also like abundance. So when you dig into why am I up at 4 o'clock in the morning doing what I'm doing or building for my family, it's going to dig into your values. So for those of you that got worksheets, when you have time, I'd really just encourage you to go through. It could take 5 minutes, could take you 30 minutes. Cry it out if you need to. Whatever comes up, comes up. But also take a few minutes to do that, because it might be surprising what you're really doing this for. So most of you have heard of FIRE formula. How many of you guys know your actual FIRE numbers, though, by show of hands? 1 dude, 2 dudes, a few of you? Perfect. This is great. So for those of you that have pens or in your phones, if you want to do this, whatever your yearly spending either is right now, if you want to start with an easy number, I have an example of 50K, just nice round number, or maybe in the future what you'd like it to be. Obviously, you don't know exactly what your expenses will be in the future. Take a guess. Start with that number, multiply it by 25. Okay, so if you're spending 50 grand a year times 25, that's going to land you at this number, 1.25 million. So that's what you need to have invested. And then a safe withdrawal rate is generally accepted around 4%. And all that's going to lead us back to is the same number that we already have, but at a monthly rate. Does that make sense to y'all? So for those of you, so yearly spending times 25, that's how we get what we need to have invested. So in this case, 1.25 mil. times 4%, and then that gets us to our monthly spend, but on a yearly basis is the same as what our annual expenses are. Does that make sense? Are any of you surprised by your number? Do you have any you want to go in the bathroom and cry about, like what my number is? We don't judge, it's okay. We need to know where we're starting with, right? So this is your financial independence freedom number. Now, obviously there can be changes with this as you decide what sort of lifestyle you want in the future. So let's talk about that. There's generally 3 accepted types. Of course, there's more. If you're in the FIRE community, it branches off into a lot, but let's keep it simple. So lean FIRE, the main tenets of this are going to be like, hey, those frugal people that are okay with living far below their means, they have a really simple business. It's a lot easier to accomplish because maybe you don't need, 10 million in the bank to be able to get to your FIRE number. These might be the people like Mr. Money Mustache. People like to go to museums and walk some parks and go to national parks instead of yachts and going to, really expensive vacations. Fat FIRE, now this is for those of you that want a more luxurious lifestyle. You're like, Tracy, keep your free parks to your damn self. We want a nice lifestyle that's more comfortable. I didn't work this hard for nothing. So that's gonna take you having a bigger business. It's going to take you a longer amount of time to get there. It's a little bit hard to check out of your business because you've built it to be at a certain level and you can't just unplug it. Barista FIRE, so this is like, hey, I want to keep a part-time job, maybe at Starbucks or a similar type job where no one's going to die if the foam on the cappuccino isn't perfect. You have healthcare benefits, you get some mental stimulation, but it's a no-pressure job, and it either supports some of your lifestyle or you're there just for the healthcare benefits. So I'd probably lean between these two. It could change over the years, but I'm probably between these two. So let me take a poll. How many of you guys think you'd be lean FIRE? Man, I'm really up here alone. Okay, a few of you that are brave enough to admit that. Who wants that fat lifestyle? One time you're allowed to be called fat. Okay, cool, you guys are about that bag, I get it. We're in Scottsdale, so I get it. And how many of you think you'd be cool with barista FIRE? Part-time job, okay, cool, a couple of us. So it's important that you know this. Again, what are we aiming for? Where are we heading? And it makes a difference. So when I got into flipping, my main reasons were to get out of debt, right? My parents were very, very responsible. I didn't learn my lesson as quick, so I had credit card debt. I wanted to make chunks of income. I also wanted to have surplus revenue to be able to invest. But mostly, guys, it was this. I saw what the investors that what they were working for, and I saw what they had built, and I wanted to do that too. So it really wasn't a egoic place, but I kind of think like for those of you that work in sales and real estate investing and work with people, like you kind of have to have an ego to be like, I should do this. I can do this. I'm going to do this now. So that was a main driver for me. But getting into it, what I really struggled with, and maybe some of you guys have the same issue, is I had worked in real estate investing for so long behind the scenes, but I was still scared to death to do a deal myself because I thought these guys were like a lot smarter than me. They knew other people with all this money. They knew how all the other paperwork worked that I hadn't been privy to. So there was gaps in there that I just didn't know how to fill in. I was just afraid to do it myself and also knowing, is this a really good deal? With that, again, scared to do that and put that all together myself because I just had these gaps that were like, how do I figure this out if I'm not going to them and asking them and it's my deal? And then I also had no background in construction. Kind of hard to get into fixing and flipping if you don't know what the heck you're doing, literally at a ground level and being on a job site. But one thing I did know about myself is I got frustrated enough working for them and asking for raises after almost a decade and scraping by, watching them become millionaires and fix and flip a ton of pre-foreclosures and then start to buy a bunch of rentals, build their wealth, build their income while I was begging for scraps. But whose fault was that, you guys, honestly? Yeah, it was mine. You guys are a lot smarter than I was at the time. So, but with that, those were the hurdles that I had to overcome. So I know some of you might ask, did you do this with a husband? Did you do this with a partner? I did not. Mr. McDreamy was taken, so no. And I say all that to say is like, if I can do this on my own, guys, honestly, I know you can too. And that's what I teach my students now too. Like if you have no background in construction, if you don't know how to fund these things, we have great resources here tonight like Vanessa, but at the time that I was doing this, we didn't have things like hot REI meetups. So if I can do this, I promise you can do it too. Here's my actual partner, like most of you guys have the same partner. So here is what it took as I was getting into fixing and flipping though. So finding investor-friendly trades. We're in Phoenix, there's a ton of contractors. How many of those actually want to work with you as an investor? And then how many of those are willing to get paid at the rates that you deem are fair, they deem are fair, and a timeline that works for everybody, right? And a combination of all of that. So that was a hurdle that I had to learn how to work through. And honestly, I actually really love the construction side of this industry. So learning about construction and project management, that was a big hurdle as well. I kind of fell in love with that process. I still do some of my own project management. I do GC all my own deals. Navigating funding. So if I were to guess, just because of the conversations that I have with a lot of people like you, this is one of the number one things that most people are like, I don't get how to do this part of the business, or they're super intimidated by it to understand, even if I came across a good deal, like, Jordan, are you still wholesaling? Hi, by the way. It's so good to see you. Jordan's one of my flip school students, you guys. Are you still wholesaling?
Here and there.
Yeah.
That's like 1 to 2 in a few months.
Cool.
Yeah.
But you come across good deals, and so part of the reason why you probably took flip school was to understand, like, what do I do with this thing if I were to take it down?
Yeah, and it helps me to talk with investors and understand like their world, and then of course I want to do it too.
Yep.
But.
Yeah. So a lot of the people that I talk to have that gap of like, even if I came across a good deal, whether it's a wholesaler or like for those of you that are agents, you're probably plucking off some of this inventory for your clients. But if I were to do that and hand you a deal, you'd maybe not know how to go through the numbers or figure out the funding, and so you'd pass it on because maybe you don't have all that money sitting in your bank account, right? So that was the big hurdle, is understanding how to get these things funded. And then also sticking to the numbers. So when things are going up 20% month over month, is it really difficult to get a deal and sell it, you guys? No, obviously not. Everyone was a genius at that point. What became more challenging is over the last few years, when 2022, for those of you that were around or had deals at that time, and the Fed decided to do what they do, and all of the, what are they called, the iBuyers went, oh shit. And all that inventory came, or excuse me, sorry, language, there's kids here. Sorry, ladies, thank you. Keep me honest, thank you. Being able to stick to the numbers when things start to change, because if you're not getting floated by a 20% month over month increase, then what do we actually have to know? Is this a good deal from the get-go? Do I actually know my rehab numbers? Everything that's involved, not only the construction numbers, the holding time, who I'm working with as a hard money lender, if I have private money behind that, and then saying no when it doesn't make sense and being looked at maybe like you're crazy. But then also when that good deal comes around and you're like, man, this stuff actually does work, right? While those other people are kind of struggling with their deals. So sticking to the numbers, honestly, is a muscle that you do have to exercise. So here's what it also took. So again, a lot of my students and a lot of people that I talk to come from backgrounds of somehow being in or around real estate. Do most of you work in the industry or are like tied to the industry to some capacity? I would imagine you're at a real estate investing meetup. But perseverance, I had worked behind the scenes for so long and in operations and assistant capacity that becoming front of house really took a different sort of energy, right? And it's the same thing with you guys. I'm sure you're in a different energy when you're in different positions in your life, but that was a muscle that really had to be exercised. Focus, especially with how much there is out there right now with this is the new thing to do and this niche and this is going to be the next best thing, is saying make this work. Continue to do it and make it work. It might not be instantaneous, but stick with it and keep going. And then lastly, a braver version of myself. So this is a little bit what I talk about being brave in this capacity. When you don't know all the things to exactly make it work, but you know enough. Vanessa and I were talking earlier about you can ask all the questions in the world, you can go to all the meetups in the world, you can ask all the gurus in the world, but until you actually start doing this yourself and say, oh God, this is so scary, I'm doing it, then you really don't get to know what it feels like to push yourself forward, right? And that's when you start to get the momentum. That's also when you start to get the challenges, but you're also in the same right proving to yourself that you're willing to do what it takes to get there. And that's sort of the barrier to entry with a lot of things, but especially with fixing and flipping. So I'll show you a few before and afters. My niche has been entry level and move up price point. I love working on condos, townhomes, entry-level properties, move-up properties, simply because I like the price point. We were talking earlier about underwriting different things, and when you can have entry-level properties, I like to look at them. Can I rent this? Can I flip this? Is there another exit strategy? It tends to be the price point that you have the most forgiveness with. So that has been my niche, is staying in that playing field. So this is an example of a little condo that I opened up. I also like how I can make things a little bit more designer, smaller footprint, so I can do a little bit more thoughtful design on it. Mid-level, so typically I'm knocking out walls. This one's leveling floors, open concept, all the things. Open it up a little bit more. So what gets really interesting is when you start to do more flips and then come across deals like this. This was a hoarder house off of 7th Street in Osborne area. Built like a little shoebox, huge yard. Hopefully the new owners developed that back because it's on such a huge lot. But this was a hoarder house. Have any of you ever done hoarder houses before? Have you? No? Okay.
Sell them.
Pardon?
I sell them.
Yeah, you sell them?
Yeah, so we get them a lot.
Oh, okay. Well, if you need another buyer, I buy hoarder houses. Obviously, I love them. But this one was really interesting, guys. This homeowner, it was it's like a sad story, but it's also a really rewarding story for everyone. I had to meet him at Wendy's because the property smelled so bad, like I couldn't stand it. And so I'm like, let's just go to Wendy's and meet up. And so we helped him get out of a foreclosure. I ended up keeping this as a rental, and just full disclosure, I did keep this for a while, so this wasn't like an overnight thing. But after I rehabbed, got it fixed up, stuck good renters in there, finally decided to sell it, this was the net profit. So $140,000 on that, and then turned around and bought more rentals. So part of my point with these examples is finding you don't have to have home runs every single time. We like to call them base hits, right? So base hits that just make sense. Decent 10% profit. You don't have to hold out for stuff that's making 20 or 30% profit on every flip. So little condos, townhouses, entry-level houses, do a few of those. And I will talk about this later, what it looks like to move forward with your finances as a flipper. But then investing in rentals that then pay you dividends, right? So do you think that 140K is a game changer for what that means for personal finances? I would hope so. Yes.
So when you're saying percent profit, are you saying based on the amount of money you have in the deal, or based on the purchase price, or what's the percent that you're talking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's in one of my slides too, but I love that you're asking that already. So when I say 10%, it's based on the resale value of the property. So if it's worth, let's just say an average house is worth about $400 now, I want to see you make it about $40,000 profit, not accounting for your taxes or whatever it took you there to get that deal. Like if you paid $5K in marketing or something, but your gross profit from that should be about $40K. Does that make sense to you guys? So as I was starting to build on my own since 2015, again, my ego kicked in. And I'm sure this hasn't happened to anybody else in this room, where you look at other investors and see them growing their businesses and sharing more on socials and having more employees and doing all these things. So here's what I thought. Well, I'm so cool, right? I should have a big business. I should hire a bunch of employees. I should do more volume because that's what all the cool kids do. So if I add more employees and do more volume, I should make a ton more money, right? Thank you, you probably know I'm wrong. And then I should have more staff. I should go out and get an office and have an executive assistant, have virtual assistants, and have marketing assistants, and have all these things. So guys, I kept building and adding more of these people to the mix, thinking that if I had been able to do this much on my own with like one virtual assistant, I should be able to do this much with all these people. Well, how many of you think that that really worked out how I thought it would? It didn't, right? So this is a trap that I see very, very often in this industry, especially, is the shoulds. You look around and you see what everyone's doing and it looks so cool, and you think I should be that cool, and so I should go do that. So this was a picture taken, Arizona Foothills magazine. They did a little blip on my business. And paradoxically, I had flown out to Florida that weekend for a mastermind that I was in. And in a room full of my peers, I said, you guys, I am having this problem with my overhead because I thought having all this stuff, I've been trying to make this work for this amount of time. It doesn't look like the cash flow is there like I thought it would be. I thought I'd have more deals. And my executive assistant is getting expensive, you know, and I have this office and I have these things, and what should I do? And they're like, well, dude, if it's not making sense to keep him there, then you might think about getting rid of him and maybe downsizing a little bit. So having been an executive assistant myself and having worked in operations, I'm like, no, I can't get rid of him. I don't want to do that. I'll make this work. I want to be cool. You know, it's a lot of ego. Like, I don't want to say I don't need an assistant and all this crap to do my job. So we took a break after my presentation, and I walked outside and got a text. Well, guess who the text was from? The assistant. And he goes, by the way, this is my last day here. I've locked the office. Hope you're having a good trip. Yeah. So I thought, that's really interesting. And I go back in, and people are still at lunch, and we came back in. And I go, you know that problem I had about 30 minutes ago? Y'all must have been sending the good vibes, because that's no longer a problem. So ever since then, part of my point is, like, please learn from my mistakes, is you really don't have to have all these layers. And again, it has to do with, like, are we doing what we think the cool kids are doing, or are we actually building a better business? Not a bigger business, a better business. So that's when I started to take my personal finances and my business finances a lot more seriously. Sometimes, you know, I'm Italian, so I think I need, like, the pan over the head sometimes. Like, I don't necessarily get things the first time, so I blame it on that. But my reasons for FIRE became a lot more clear. One of my main incentives is I'm growth oriented. I like the idea of personal growth and professional growth. That might mean different things to me than it does to you and that it does to you, but I'm really growth oriented. When I dial down on my values, like I hope you guys do, that was the main one. Accomplishment, I just like challenges. I like being able to say, oh, I can do that. I'm sure like you guys do too. That's why we like investing. There's a certain thrill with it. I also like the idea of options. You know, I love being in the real estate investing community. I loved working for investors, but I also like the idea of not having to do things if I don't want to do them and doing it on my timeline and at what capacity I want to do them at. And most interestingly, having built financial freedom is I've really understood how important this word is to me. Peace. It is really, really, really nice to wake up and be like, my bills are paid, everything's on autopilot, I can do this, I cannot do this, I can say yes to this, I can say heck no to this. I'm watching my language, ladies, I promise. But this is really important to me as well. So you guys will know what your values are once you dial in, but it's game changing. So going back and forth, and I promise this all does come together, why I see people avoid rehabbing, and you guys might have other reasons as well. Big one is I'm scared of contractors taking advantage of me. I either don't know how much they charge, or I don't have a construction background. How do I know that they're not overcharging me? How do I get them to show up? All the things, but essentially being scared of contractors, that's a big reason why I hear people not get into, or they tell me is why they don't get into fixing and flipping. Along the same vein is they don't know how to do the numbers on projects. Like, okay, if the wholesaler says it's valued at this and then they're selling me at this, that makes it a good deal, right? No, I can see some of you have learned your lesson the hard way and you're like, no, yep. So you don't know the numbers on your projects, and there's a lot of things that go into it, but being intimidated by that, by the sheer math of it. Unsure of funding a good deal, so knowing it's a good deal, but then even if it is a good deal, how do I know how to come up with the cash? If I don't have all the money for the down payment, for the renovation, for the holding costs, for all the things, how do I get money to do this deal? How do I fund it? So that's also a hurdle. Lack of support. So if you're out in the field doing the things, man, it is so nice to be able to like have a resource to be able to call and say, what would you do in this situation? I don't care how many times you guys have been on Bigger Pockets or gone to meetups or gone to, you know, a event. You can ask the questions, but again, once you are in the thick of doing your own deals, it's like for those of you that are newer agents or agents, like, yeah, I went to school, but then being in the field is totally different, right? It's not any different with flipping, and in fact, it's probably exponential because there's more risk. Where and how to find, oh, I think it cut off here. So where and how to find a good deal. There's not a lack of properties. You guys are probably on a lot of wholesalers list or scouring the MLS, right? So if those are all good deals, why aren't they being sold every day? Why aren't they flying off? Because they're not good deals. So how do you know if it's a good deal, right? So how do we know how to find good deals? Lack of confidence. People are pretty honest sometimes in these conversations. They're like, I think I can do some of this, but I'm just kind of scared to death to do it. I don't know if I can do it, honestly. And then it seems overwhelming. I mean, I know I felt this way before I branched off on my own. It just seemed really overwhelming. And this is someone that had worked for real estate investors doing mostly distressed properties, pre-foreclosure. I had done door knocking. So, I mean, I have guts, but I still was overwhelmed. So I get how that feels. A big question that I've been getting in the last year or so especially, is does rehabbing still work? My joke with that is no, that when interest rates change, people only want to live in crappy houses now. So obviously people want to live in nice houses, and especially with affordability being the way that it is. Do you have a question?
I do. I don't want to interrupt you, but I do have a question.
Yeah, please.
Just going back to the last slide about how or why people avoid rehabbing. What tips do you have for people to overcome different aspects of why they avoid rehab?
Which one specifically? What do you hear the most?
I don't know. I'll tell you right now, me personally, I struggle with knowing the numbers and knowing, I mean, I can ARB a property, but I don't know shit, sorry, about rehab costs and stuff like that. And so knowing, and you know, I don't trust wholesalers. Sorry if any of your wholesalers in here, but I personally don't know the numbers well enough to rock this account. I personally don't know the numbers well enough to look at a deal and know, hey, is this a good deal? What is it going to take to get to it? I can tell you an ARB at the end of the day, but I'm not good at, and maybe it's a lack of, it's kind of a mix of seems overwhelming and lack of confidence of those numbers. And it kind of goes back to the lack of construction experience, but really at the same time, I don't know that side of it. So what tips would you have for somebody who's trying to overcome some of those challenges?
Right. So that's actually a perfect example of sort of a coagulation of all these, and that's how the conversations go. Is it's not just this thing, it's how do they all tie together, and oh crap, I'm pretty overwhelmed by it. So the easiest answer is calculators and knowing how to go through each of, like I have a really simple calculator that you can download to be able to go through each of those numbers, and then it actually gives you a really simple equation for understanding the rehab cost if you're looking at something, for instance, a wholesale deal, and you have 15 minutes to do back of the napkin math. Understanding construction costs, I do give people a lot of tips on how to do that. It's a little bit too much to go into right now, but it really is learning to go through the math. So like with what you're doing in real estate now, I'm sure the first time you did it, you were super intimidated, and then there's like different tools, and once you exercise those a little bit and go through real world examples, if I could talk, it helps you break it down. So it's a little bit of repetition and exposure, and then also understanding what does a good deal look like versus also understanding that the other 90% of them are going to be dogs. And that's where people get really tripped up too, is they're like, I'm looking at these, but then they're not penciling out. Well, I'm like, they're not penciling out for me either. That's just the majority of them. So it's just, in a nutshell, it's understanding and exposure, and then going through the calculations, a lot of mathing it out. Yeah, and then the support helps too. So like I'll do that with my students. If they're like, hey, I think this is a deal, we'll jump on a call and go through it together. So, but good question. So with rehabbing, going back to affordability, the Fed said that they're going to keep interest rates the way that they are. Obviously, they don't affect mortgage rates exactly, but they're influenced by what's happening. So for the majority, probably of the rest of the year, potentially, interest rates are going to stay where they're at, and people were expecting that they were going to come down. So with wages not rising at the same rate, housing prices continue to go up for lack of supply, and mortgages being where they are, we're really butting up against affordability. So as rehabbers, it's kind of incumbent on us to put out a good product, because people they can't afford to replace the AC. They can't afford to do all the heavy lifting that they're expecting you to do as a rehabber. So it's actually an argument why rehabbing still works, because if you put out a good product and people are shopping knowing full well I'm gonna pay 7%, 6 3/4, whatever normal interest rates are right now, they want something that they can look at as their forever home and say, we're not going to have to pay an arm and a leg to redo this ourselves, right? So if you can also think about paying for a rate buy down for them or incentivizing them, get people excited about your product. Rehabbing does work in any market. It's just a matter of understanding the numbers like we were talking about, and there's some tricks that I show my students on the resale side to think about. to buffer their numbers such that they can think about this as well.
Hey Tracy, one question for you.
Yeah.
In that tone, are you making different rehab decisions to be able to sell in this market? In the past, you might not have to do the roof, right, or the new AC, but maybe are you considering putting the new AC unit in on a project now that maybe you wouldn't have done 2 years ago?
That's a really good question. So you really have to take a temperature of what's happening not only in the market, but the sub-market. So if I'm looking at Chandler, super hot, I don't know if any of you guys are selling in the Chandler market versus the Buckeye market, which is a dog right now. They're giving properties away essentially because it's in such a buyer's market. So if you're looking around to say, well, what are the neighbors doing? What is the expectation? Talking to your realtor, it gives you a gauge of at what level do I need to have my fits and finishes and essentially my systems as well. So to your point, the big ticket items, the AC, the roof, the windows, it's taking a little bit from both of those to say, what is the expectation going to be here? And then can I get a premium if I do those things as well? Obviously, you're never going to get 100% ROI for any sort of update, but there are certain things that should you put that, you're going to get a premium and you're going to get even above market price. Yeah. Does that make sense to you guys, thinking about finishes and what you need to do? So here's on the same thing, to Travis's point, here's what I recommend in this market for those of you that are thinking about flipping. So underwriting dialed in, kind of like we were talking about, is making sure that you know your numbers. A safer buy box. Do you guys know what buy box means? The parameters by which you'll buy properties. So if you want a 1980 and newer, 3-bed, 2-bath, 2,000 square feet and under, and Phoenix would be an example. So buying in a safer buy box, buying in a safer area, buying with safer margins. You're not going to go out and do something at 3% margin that needs a huge overhaul that's going to take you 9 months to redo in Buckeye, right? You're probably going to find something more closer to the city center that allows you to get in, get out, get it on the market, and make enough to make it make sense. That's what I mean by safer. Low to mid sow. Does anyone know what this word means? Ayo, who said that? Good job. Good job, boys. Yep, so scope of work, just a really fancy way of saying what am I going to do to this property to update it? Okay, am I renovating it? Am I updating it? Am I completely overhauling it? Low to mid scope of work just means cosmetic to mid-grade. I'm not taking this thing down to the studs and redoing absolutely everything. Being that, as flippers, we kind of have to know, we kind of have to predict what's going to happen in the next 3 to 6 months. If your timeline takes you so far out towards the end of the year and we don't know what's going to happen with affordability, all these other influences might change what that house is worth a little bit. Phoenix used to be able to, well, most real estate, we used to be able to get some sort of timeline before the tidal wave came in. And with social media and how quickly things change now, again, I'll refer back to 2022 when the Fed changed interest rates. It was almost overnight. It was crazy. I don't know if you guys were getting calls, but it was pretty gnarly. And that used not to be the case. It typically was a slow moving thing. So now with how things are the way that they are, I just like to see you guys in mid-grade to low scope of work. Cost control, so knowing your order of operations, getting your project management dialed in, stacking your trades, having multiple guys work on the project at the same time, thoughtful output. We're not making these our dream properties. Listen, we're not doing everything that we would want in our dream house. We're looking around the neighborhood to say, what do people expect? How can I make this look a little bit more designer, keep it on a budget, get it on the market? So what do I also see working right now? Well, you guys are the perfect audience for this because you're here, but relationships. Being able to pick up the phone, with Vanessa, she is what I would say a good relationship to have because as a hard money lender, when you call her and say, hey, what do you think about this property? She's going to say, well, I have other rehabbers in the area that are doing this. You might consider this, right? So that's sort of a partnership and an extra pair of eyes. So think about that with whoever you're combining your business with, title company, hard money lenders, your trades. Ask them as well. People are partnering on deals, JVing on deals. I'm seeing a lot of relationships that way. And then procedural oversight to the resale. A lot of rehabbers think oh, I've done the pretty stuff. Now the agent and the broker and the title company are going to take this away and then I'm just going to get a fat check here in a month. Is that how it works? Heck no. I said heck. Heck no. So we have to be able to really, I know. I feel it. We have to really be able to keep this dialed in, and a lot of people take their foot off the gas because they're so used to getting the rehab done and then thinking that everyone's just going to handle it. Not in this market. You are on people, you're on the B2C lender, you're on the title company, you're on the agent, you're on everybody, right? Your job is the ship captain. So how do most people get into rehabbing? I see a lot of people that are just like, screw it, let's go. And then they just wage a war on whatever property that they've finally decided is going to be, yep, cringe is exactly it. So this is kind of how I see a lot of people get into rehabbing. Can be a little scary. If the market floated you, congratulations. It's probably not going to be the case now though, right? So this is how most people actually get into rehabbing. You guys are probably exactly along these lines since most of you are in or around real estate already. So I see a lot of agents. You guys are handing this over to your clients. Keep some for yourself. Learn what a good deal looks like. Connect with lenders. Even if you did one measly deal a year, it can change everything, I promise you. If you're already a tradie, if you work in the service somehow, or you're working in the RE industry, I work behind the scenes, again, in operations, property management, working for investors. And this is normally how I see people choose to get into rehabbing. Either spend a fortune on gurus, do something with it, most of them don't, randomly buy a flip, let's say from a wholesaler, rent or renovate their own house, gives you some exposure, not the same thing, but still, or join a bunch of groups and never do anything. So this is how I see most people get into it and then just kind of fumble through it as they go. So I'm one of those crazy people. I like rehabbing, I like construction. Why is that? And why do I think it's beneficial for you guys too, regardless of if you want to do fix and flipping or multifamily or ground up or property management or any of this? I think it makes you a lot better investor. If you understand construction numbers just a little bit to be able to oversee some of what's happening, make better decisions around that, understand cost control, understand being able to material source, it's going to apply to any type of real estate that you do. And even as an agent, might it not be beneficial if you know a little bit about that when your clients are asking you on an inspection and they're freaking out because they're first-time home buyers and you're like, actually, you know, I'm not a contractor, get your own opinion, but here's some information. So I think having some sort of understanding of construction helps you to be a better investor, regardless of what areas of real estate that you're touching. So with quick chunks of cash, let's be honest, most of us want to do flipping because of those 5-figure paychecks, right? Like they're pretty dope. It's nice to have. For most of us, it's like even if you're making steady income, having those $20, $30, $40, $50, $60, $70,000 paychecks make a difference. It's nice to get those quick chunks of cash. With that, used strategically, I'll repeat, used strategically can make a huge difference in your life in just a few short years. And like I said before, I think once you expose yourself to something that you thought maybe I can't do this, and you actually go through that, especially a rehab, like poor Vanessa, like you were in the mix of it right now being dragged through your rehab. But afterwards, it just builds a different type of confidence and it helps you see things in a different way. Having a network of trades and then you having some rehab experience as well will open you up to new opportunities. It's really helped my career tremendously, so I can report from the other side that it is, in fact, it does hold a ton of upside. So like you had asked, the chunky money. So when I refer to, hey, I expect you to make about a 10% profit, great question. What does that actually mean? So same example that I gave him. If a property right now, I know that median price in Phoenix is a little bit more, but let's say you're doing something a little bit less expensive. If the property is worth 40K, adjust this to whatever price points you would be working in. Your pre-tax profit, but your gross profit would be 40,000. Okay? Any questions about this? Oh, okay, thanks. So I'm going to go through some of these really quickly. Breakdown, so like we were talking about, going through your numbers, this spreadsheet walks you through everything that you need to know about to keep you safe and keep you in line to know if it's a good deal. For any of you that want this, I won't go through it because we're running out of time. You can download this for free off my website. There's also a code that you can scan that'll take you to, I think that's for Flip School, but you can get it off my Instagram page too. So if you're making 40K on each of these deals, doing a few deals a year, What I like to do as far as how many projects I like to do, knowing what I value, knowing the lifestyle that I want to build and continue to have, if you have one project just starting, one project going and one being sold, do you guys think that that's manageable for both of you, for most of you? Yeah, nothing too crazy, right? I mean, if you're doing super heavy construction, it can get a little bit wanky, but if you're not doing that, this is very reasonable. I have students that still have full-time jobs that even if they're doing one at a time, it makes perfect sense. So what does this have to do with financial independence? I was watching this YouTube video today that credit card defaults are going up, debt is going up. I'm not gonna go in this too much because I'm probably, you guys are probably exposed to this as well. But essentially at every avenue of our life, we're being sold something, told to consume more, wages aren't going up, inflation is going crazy. But if you think about it, once you get out of college, you have wedding debt, then you have school loan debt, then you're getting a car, so you have car loan debt, then you have credit card debt because you're buying the things for the house, then you have medical debt, potentially. Then we start to have lifestyle creep because we're seeing what the neighbors are doing, so we're buying more crap because we want to look like them, and that's never-ending wants. So as fast as we're making it, we're spending it, right? I'm sure you guys see this with your friends and neighbors and everything, right? So if I'm the first to say it to you, probably not, but the system is really not here to say, hey, once you graduate college, here's how you become financially free. That happened, it started before high school. They're putting you on the trolley of debt. Do any of you guys know, what was the name of this movie? Clueless, thank you. Yep.
That's my favorite movie.
Yep.
Long-term stat.
I got you, yep. Debt-free as if, yep. Yep, whatever. So no, the system is not here to help you build your dreams. So this is when you guys really need to understand what are my numbers and what do I need to do in my personal finance to be able to combine that with my business to get out of the rat race. Okay, so here are 3 budgeting tools. And again, you can write any of these down on your worksheet or if you want to take a picture. So this is You Need a Budget, or as I like to say, y'all need a budget. So youneedabudget.com, YNAB. There's mint.com. For those of you that don't want anything that's not free, then you can go to Google Sheets under free templates and then just type in monthly budget and there's a couple options there. Yes?
It does not exist anymore.
Then we're going to...
Just recently shut down within like the last 30 days. So
Really? Okay.
that was always my favorite too. But
Dang.
just so everybody knows that one does not exist anymore.
Thank you. Okay, well, that gets stricken from the record.
Credit Karma bought them out, and you can save your time on Credit Karma.
Not so much. Okay. This is why it's important to have these so we know what's up to date. Yep. I'm sure once you type, if you were to type in budgeting tools, more stuff would come up. But
Dave Ramsey's one too.
Monarch is pretty good.
Monarch?
Personal capital.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
There's lots out there.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Everyone but the one that Tracy put up on the large screen. Yep. Appreciate the support, boys. Okay. So what does this have to do? Make sure I didn't skip up. So what does this have to do with rehabbing? Okay, so sounds like I'm jumping all over the place. I get it, talking about rehab and construction and then personal finances. So let's combine these and wrap up. So what does FIRE have to do with construction and flipping and rehabbing? Well, using those chunks of money that we talked about, getting yourself out of debt. Remember how I said using them strategically? So not changing anything about your lifestyle, getting out of debt, funding your savings, changing your relationship to spending, going through your expenses, understanding if you're spending based on values or just spending to spend, and getting out of the rat race. So what I like to do is use the excess proceeds from my flips to create passive income, and that's what I've been doing since 2015. So here is a simple, easy system. Guys, I'm not reinventing the wheel when it comes to fixing and flipping, right? But there's a few things that I think are really important for you to focus on as you're going into this. Most of you have more trouble with the analyzing and what to fix, which also, if you get good at this and this and the flipping part becomes easier, okay? So the big thing I see with people analyzing deals is, like we talked about, underwriting them well and knowing, how do I get good deals? Not just properties that wholesalers send out, but how do I actually get good deals? So we make sure that you're dialed in on that. Funding them, if I don't have millions of dollars sitting in my bank account, how do I get them funded? The project management and scope, knowing what to fix and how to oversee it. And then flipping, GTM just stands for going to market on the B2C side, a little bit like we talked about, staying on it like a hawk. So here's my approach. If you're only doing a few flips a year, which honestly is really all you need, again, if you're using that money strategically, is having a process from the get-go. And then these two things you can kind of go back and forth with. Like, you should be organizing your business and your personal budget from the get-go. But regardless, on your first few flips, where a lot of people really go wrong is they go out and start buying stuff, and then they spend the money, or they make $50K or $100K, and they think, oh, I'm just gonna spend that all on the next flip, and if I did a $250K flip, I'm gonna go for $1 million property, and then they lose everything. So having a disciplined approach from the get-go, paying off your bad debt, paying off your car notes, and creating a separate nest egg. Do you think most people are disciplined enough to even do these? They just go out and say, like me, oh, I should just go get a virtual assistant, I should get an office, and I should get another assistant, I should do all this other stuff, right? So now again, I'm teaching you guys so you could get there faster. Flips 4 to 6, you can start thinking about getting private money, alternative financing, raising money. Again, you should have your business and personal budget organized by then. Get at least a handful of flips under your belt. These numbers are going to change depending on your personal financial situation, but again, roundabout numbers, say you get a handful under your belt. Now we can start buying assets. I like rentals, so start buying rentals with the proceeds, investing in your business, and then the rental income starts to pay for your living expenses, if not your lifestyle. Now, you can't do this all in a year, right? It's going to take some time. But again, if we walk into it saying, what do I need for my expenses and lifestyle? What's my business supposed to do for my lifestyle? And what do I really value? It makes everything a lot easier to approach rather than, I'm going to flip a bunch of properties and make a bunch of money and make a huge mess and not really know what's really coming or going.
One thing about doing the buying with the rentals too is there's a huge tax benefit to doing that.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, that helps you, to decrease your tax bill at the same time.
1,000%. Yep. So if you're making those huge chunks of cash, say if you're someone else is working and making a lot of money too, you need to offset some of that income because otherwise you're going to get taxed quite a bit. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So a couple of questions. I know one of them at least is going to vary, but do you consider flipping to be a business, or is it kind of a job that you own because you're managing these and you're actively making the money that way? That's the first question.
That's a great question. So it depends. If you start to scale, like I think you can do at least 5, 8, maybe even 10 properties a year by yourself with an assistant. That's a business, right? It is a job if you were still showing up. With the amount of project management that I've done, I just have a really hard time handing that over if I'm not doing a ton of volume. And so it's one of those things, like I have it streamlined. And again, at this point, if I only need to do a few deals a year, it doesn't make sense for me to lean towards making a lot more of it automated, right? So it kind of depends on your scale and then also your lifestyle and where you're at too. If you have a full-time job, you might think about just having a project manager from the get-go.
Thank you.
I do see you, yeah.
My other question would be just, and I know this would vary from project to project, but if you're doing 1 to 3 flips a year, how much time commitment is that taking for you to do versus like a rental house where they send you a check?
Yeah.
Usually, and that works out.
Yeah, that's a great question. So it depends. Like if you're doing some of the marketing, then however much time that takes. If you are, I'm going to keep the same example. If you're holding down a full-time job or even a part-time job, you're probably going to outsource some of it to begin with. So then you're limited on what you need to do, which is overseeing the people that are doing it. Like you need to come up with a scope of work, you need to have the schedule dialed in, put your project manager in place and show up, 1 to 2 times a week, but be on the phone, be available with him on the phone. So it can depend on how you're setting it up from the get-go and what you want that to look like. But there's certain points of that you have to dial in, drive the herd a certain way, and then just manage them. Does that answer your question?
Not really, but it makes sense.
1 hour, yeah. It can vary, but I think if you're only doing one, you could probably get by on like less than 10 hours a week if you're putting the right people in place and starting it with a disciplined process from the get-go. Yes.
Going back to this first question about job versus business, I think a lot of people, and I've had this conversation with a lot of people over the years, I think a lot of people undermine what constitutes a business. And at the end of the day, I believe when you're leveraging other people in any way, you run a business. You may be still working in the business, but the goal should be to get to a point where you're working on your business more than you're working in the business. But when you have the mindset that I am running a business, it changes the way that you look at the way you run it, it changes the way you operate it, it changes the way that you interact with the people that you are leveraging versus thinking I'm just working in a job, and I think it's undervaluing what a business is. Now, if you were literally doing everything from driving for dollars all the way through the rehab to you listing and selling it yourself, then okay, maybe that might take away from the business aspect of it as much. That is just one hell of a business that's going to drive you to the ground really fast.
Right.
But I think when you change the way that you think about that differentiation, can really help you actually scale that business fast.
1000%. So a couple different points. So like within my Flip School dashboard, I give people the resources and templates and breakdowns because I had to figure all this out, and it was like a shotgun approach to do everything, whereas it's like follow these whether you're doing a few deals a year or 10 deals a year. The other thing with, I want to touch on this just for a second because you said it, was scaling. That's one of the things I just want to be very transparent about, is like why are you scaling? There's nothing wrong with it, but just being very clear, what does scaling mean to you? Because sometimes people are like, I want to do 100 flips a year. And then I'm going to be like, that exercise, why? Because I see these guys doing it and it seems really cool. Why does that seem cool? Because I get more respect, or it seems like that's a better business. Why does that seem like a better business, or why do you want that respect? Do you guys see where I'm going with this? Like, why do you want to have a huge flipping business? Zillow's kind of a cautionary tale. It's a bad example because they're so corporate, but it's one of those reasons. And I will say, as a flipper, this is one of the most difficult businesses to scale at large, to have it make sense year after year, month after month, quarter after quarter, keep everything going, keep all the cogs moving, and also keep a healthy profit without losing all your hair. All right, so here's the part where it becomes boring. Like we talked about with the personal finances, once you guys get that dialed in, having no debt, and by debt, I mean bad debt. Bad debt meaning consumer debt, anything that doesn't leverage you into cash flowing or appreciating assets. I'm fine with leverage, that being mortgages, everything else needs to go. So if you have no debt and low overhead, whether you're keeping a job, you're an agent, you work in title, whatever you do, and you're doing 2 or 3 flips a year, can you guys see how having that overage and then you're investing in assets like index funds, dividends, cash flowing rental properties, how it really simplifies things and you don't need a ton anymore? I might be one of the only investors on the planet that is like, you don't need to do a ton of deals to have a really dope life. But this is what I've built since 2015, and I like to think it works pretty well. So I'll wrap this up. Thank you guys. I know I've gone over here, but for those of you that are interested, I do have a program, a course called Flip School. I share a lot on social media. I do a lot of these meetups. I try to add a ton of value wherever I can. I do teach people how to rehab to create financial freedom as well, and I've condensed that all into my brainchild called Flip School. So it does give you step-by-step training process. It's a hybrid to where you have access to a dashboard with all the videos that take you through step-by-step. And then you also get 3 months of weekly online group coaching. So it's a hybrid. So that way you get online dashboard coaching, which Jordan has taken. If you have any questions, I'm sure she'd be nice enough to answer any questions too. We do have an online community as well. And then a lot of the tools that I use in my business, cost repair estimator, deal calculator, templates, spreadsheets, all the things. So I kind of give you a little business, and as long as you guys do the work, my students have had massive success. If you want to jump on a call and talk about it more, you can schedule that, but I don't want to take up too much time tonight. But really what I've seen, honestly guys, is it gives my students the confidence and the support and the tools. It's sort of a combination of things that people are really looking for. So I've tried to combine those into one thing. And I realize I talk with my hands a lot. That's the Italian thing, sorry. I can't help it, I swear. So lastly, I'll wrap up with this. I didn't see anything change. I remember in my mentality being so frustrated working behind the scenes, and like one of you had said when I asked whose fault was that, it was mine. But I had to get to a point where I was just really frustrated, and then I'm like, you know what? I don't care what it takes. I'll figure it out. Because this, if I keep doing this for 1 more year or 6 months, I'm gonna go nuts. And I had tried to stay and ask for raises, and have you guys ever been in that position when you're just like so frustrated? You're like, something's got to change, and the signs keep showing up, and you're like, you don't want to do it, and then it's just like, I'll figure it out. So that's what I got to. So things will not change until you let them change and until you decide to make that decision. So that's the bravery part. The personal finance part is where it gets boring. People don't want to talk about budgets. I mean, you guys do. You have all these great budgeting tools, so I love this crowd. I love you guys for that. You're like, we got 10 of them. So the personal finance, and if you take that and just trust the process and give this some time, like I will never tell you this is like a 6-month thing, right? Like it takes years. It's okay though, you gotta build. But by combining bravery and being boring and trusting the process and taking time, that's how you can reach financial independence faster through rehabbing. So for those of you interested, if you haven't already followed me on social media, I'd love to connect with you there, wherever you're at. I'm probably there. I post mostly on Instagram these days, somewhat on TikTok. YouTube will be up and running again here in the near future, but regardless, all under the same handle, Royce of Real Estate. If you want my free download for my fix and flip analyzer, you can get that off my Instagram page or my website. If any of you want to talk about Flip School, you can scan this and either go through that page and sign up, or if you want to book a call to talk to me directly, then we can go through if Flip School is for you. What I'm doing, Travis and I talked before this, and he was generous enough to let me give you guys a discount code. So for within 1 week, you guys get a discount on Flip School as well, but that will expire this time next week. So I'll leave this up, and then I'll stick around for any Q&A. But otherwise, thank you guys for being such an amazing group tonight. Thank you.
All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed that special Hot Real Estate Investing Meetup podcast where we had special guest Tracy Royce come and drop some fire to our audience of real estate investors that show up each and every month, usually on the first or second Tuesday, to be able to network, to be able to get some education, some free food. Oh yeah, did I mention this meetup's free? And we bring together as much, and I try to provide as much value as I do on this podcast for free at the meetup every month. It's just awesome. I get just as much out of it as anyone that comes to attend. I learn at every single one of them. So if you're in the Phoenix market or you're just happen to be in Phoenix for a month, come check out a meetup. Check out hotrei.com for future events or our Facebook group event page. Hope to see you in the future.
Thank you for listening to the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast. Check out our website, hotrei.com, for additional content and resources. And please take a moment to subscribe and leave a review so we can continue to bring even more value to others through real estate investing.